I got this new fancy gimbal because I'm wanting to do some vlogging and podcasting and stuff. And so this is my first time using it. So it's probably not going to work quite right. It seems to be tracking my face okay, but rather slowly to respond. So I'm not sure how to fix that. So I'll probably go off frame a few times. I'm hanging out in a Walmart parking lot. Nothing to do today. So I thought I'd tell you the story of my 1995 ordeal. So let me back up a few years because it started back then. Now this was before internet. This was around 1993. Bill Clinton just got elected, and I was rather more political then. Always been an anarchist since 10 years old. I was 10 years old when I first heard the term anarchist, and I was in the 1980s punk scene, and that's where I heard about it and started looking into it and thought, yeah, this is what I've always been from 6 years old. I remember the moment that I realized everything was bullshit. And anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I was 10 years old when I heard the term and realized I wasn't the only one. And jumped into 80s punk, the anarchist scene back then. Anarchist cookbook was going around my middle school. Punks. There's Nazi punks in my calligraphy class, and then there was a hippie. So the three of us were anarchists of three different flavors. And me and the Nazi punk were always going at it, fighting. He seemed to be 3 or 4 years older than everybody there because he was an idiot. And I don't know. But I was in 7th grade and he tried to run me over with a car. And I was wondering, it's probably his car. Anyway, I've gotten way off track here. Anyway, 1993, I was more political because I saw the whole Clinton thing as really bad. And not that George Bush was any better. I was not a big fan of his. But I was rather, I guess, pleasantly surprised by Reagan. The whole smaller government thing was resonating. But the debt and everything and the military spending, I was not a big fan of. But I was young at that point anyway, so I wasn't really political then. But anyway, I had started a bulletin board service, BBS, in my apartment in 1993. And we were sharing documents and all kinds of stuff. It was called the Militia. Back then, the militia movement was all over the news. I thought that's a great way to get some publicity, is to adopt that name. So the electronic militia was my bulletin board service running out of Anaheim, California. And it getting a lot of traffic. There was a lot of files coming on. One day, I came home to my apartment and I look at the couch and there's drywall dust on it. And I look and see there's a hole drilled in the wall and right above my couch. And who did that? So I asked my roommate. He didn't know anything about it. And I thought, that's weird. So I thought maybe the neighbor in the apartment next door was drilling into their wall and poked through I asked them, and they sat up at another level. They were their floor was at eye level. So I thought maybe they had the cable guy in there putting a cable in through the floorboards, and it came into, nope, checked with them, nothing. So I went back to my apartment, go into the kitchen, and there's drywall dust on the countertop and another hole in the wall above the countertop. I'm like, what the hell? I just think nothing of it, cleaned up the mess, and I started thinking about it, and I started getting paranoid. And if someone installed a camera, they could see what I'm watching on TV from the hole in the wall above my couch. And from the hole in the wall in the kitchen, they could see into the dining room where I have my computer set up. And so I'm like, I gotta find out what's going on here. So I chiseled out a hole in the wall, and sure enough, I saw fiber optic camera in there. Oh shit. So that's weird. Started to make plans to move out of there. Actually, I moved out of there rather quickly. And my friends let me stay over at their house. couch surf on their thing, and I left no forwarding address, didn't change my mail, nothing. Just upped and left, and came back, got my things later. And so I was in there, ran my BBS out of their house for a while. And about a month later, one of them comes in to me and says, "Hey, were you messing around in the phone junction box?" And I said, "No." "Well, somebody left the lid off of it. And they were wondering if I had installed a phone line for the BBS or something like that." I said, "No, I didn't do any of that." So we go in there and look. My friend Mike comes over too. He's a electronics guy like me. And we look at it, and there's been a black box, a little 2-inch by 2-inch black box installed in there that's paralleled across the two phone lines. And it's all potted and epoxy. You can't see what's in it. There's no markings on it. And so I've never seen that before. Me neither. And so we took it off and smashed it and put the phone lines back the way they were. This is around 1995 now. And July of 1995. Now keep in mind, April 19th, 1995 was the Oklahoma City bombing. And a few days prior to that, someone had uploaded some documents to my BBS. And it was an ATF memo. And this is like probably around, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days before the bombing. There's a memo from the ATF telling the ATF agents in, okay, let me try to remember. Is basically assigning ATF agents that were in Oklahoma City to go to Billings, Montana. And so basically all the field agents that were in Oklahoma City were heading towards Montana. So I sent a message to John Truckman, who was with the Militia of Montana, that I said, "Hey, it looks like they're coming for you. You need to look out, because I got this ATF memo that all these agents are coming to Billings, Montana. And so be on alert." And then shortly after that, the Oklahoma City bombing happened. And, oh, maybe I read that wrong. They were just going there to make sure they're not in the building. So then, I guess in Long Beach, at the convention center, they had a survivalist expo. I went to that. I met with a lot of people. The FBI agent guy, what's his name? Ted Gunderson was there. I met with him. Anthony J. Hilder is a conspiracy theory guy. Jordan Maxwell, I met him. All these guys, I got their books, read their crap. Did some interviews with Anthony Hilder. And Anthony Hilder and Jordan Maxwell were a team back then. And I don't know if you know those names, but you could look them up on the internet. I did some interviews with them. Met with Ted Gunderson, bought his book. It was an investigation into the Oklahoma City bombing and what he believed happened. All that. And that was probably sometime in June. Then July comes around, and I'm going to work. I work in Cerritos, California at the time. And I drive to work, and the intersection right by my employment is just covered with what looked like 380 ACP brass. Just thousands of rounds of empty shells of brass cartridges. And I thought, that's weird. It wasn't like there was a shooting. It was like a truckload dumped its load of brass onto the intersection. And the cars are just driving over it, flattening it all out. That's weird. So I go to work my shift. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to lunch. I go to lunch, and it's still there. No one's cleaned it up. It's all flat now. It's weird. And so I don't think I'm going to come back, finish out my day, go to drive home, get to that intersection again. Now, keep in mind, I'm driving around. I'm in this whole right to travel business of don't have your license plate and don't have a driver's license and no registration in vehicle, all that stuff, and name in capital letters, all that stuff. I'm into all that. And of course, I've been posting all this stuff on my BBS. So as I'm leaving to go home, no one's cleaned this up. It's all still there. But this time there's two cop cars parked at the intersection. One is facing away from me They're both, one is facing away from me on the other side of the intersection from where I'm at. The other one is on the opposite side of the intersection facing towards me. And they're just sitting there staring at it. They're not doing anything. And from where they sit, they can't see my rear license plate or the fact that I don't have one. And the light turns green. As soon as the light turns green, their lights come on before I even start to enter the intersection. I go across the intersection, and the one guy makes a U-turn, pulls in behind me. The other guy pulls in behind me. I pull over. And now I had been out shooting in the Mojave Desert with my friends, a group that I belong to, who call themselves the Orange County Corps. Or no, SCMA, Southern California Minutemen Association, SCMA. They were affiliated with another group called the Orange County Corps. They were deemed to be militia groups, but we just went and trained, did NRA courses and stuff like that. And one of the instructors was an Irwindale Reserve police officer named Glenn Yee, Y-E-E. He's a Chinese American and was a great guy, was a great friend, and he's still a friend of mine. And then the other guy who was organized it was a guy named Jack Solomon, who owned, I don't know if he still owns it, but he owned an indoor pistol range in Artesia, California. And we used to do our indoor training at his facility. He eventually went on to become a sheriff's deputy. But anyway, that is relevant, but I told that out of order. So anyway, they pulled me over. I still had my guns in the car and I had ammo in the trunk. The cops, first thing, they come out of their cars with their pistols out, pointed at me, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? And they pulled me out of the car, asked me if there's anything in the car they need to know about. I said, I don't know what you need to know about. They said guns or drugs. And I said, at this point, they already got me out. They got me cuffed. They got my face slammed in the hood. And I'm like, yeah, I was out shooting this weekend, so I got my rifle in the trunk, and I got my pistol locked up in the box. And so one of the deputies pulls out my AR-15, takes it out of the case, opens the bipod on it, and it has a Trigun low light scope on it, and starts pointing it at traffic. And he tells his buddy, hey, this is pretty cool, check it out. I'm in the squad car at this point. The window's down. I stick my head out, the front window's down. I stick my head out lean forward towards the glass, and I yelled, stop pointing my weapon at traffic. That didn't go over well. So I went to LA County, as a satellite office in Lakewood, and because I had no license plate, they were still looking for John Doe number 2 of the Oklahoma City bombing, and Timothy McVeigh had no license plate in his getaway car. They assumed that I was John Doe number 2. So they went to the press and did a press conference and told the KTLA Channel 5 News, Hal Fishman, that they caught suspected Oklahoma City bombing suspect number 2. So I spent a weekend in there. They finally let me out with a $37,000 bail. But they were full, so they just kicked me out on my own signature bond. But then I went to a jury trial. I spent a year working on that. And they tried to frame me as a terrorist and all this stuff. But then eventually I walked with a couple misdemeanors. So it was weird. What was weird is all the weird events that led up to it, like the brass being out there. Like, this is a setup of some sort. Like, they tried to, I don't know, why they pulled me over at that exact intersection and then asked if there was guns in the car, pretty much. And had I had a .38 caliber, they might have tried to blame me for this. Rounds of .38 caliber. I don't know what they were thinking, but it was weird. But they sat out there all day with it and didn't do anything. No street sweepers came, no nothing. Just sat there and waited for me to drive by. And then, so my trial was interesting. So there's a couple things I forgot to mention in the first part of my video there. One is, the week prior to all this happening, the company I worked for was a motor control panel builder. And not our office, which is in Cerritos, but a different office had built some controls for a guacamole factory in Mexicali for Cal Avo. And the panel caught fire. And when they called us, to come down and take a look at it and fix it. There was some translations problems, so we thought like a contactor burned or something like that. So anyway, they sent me down there with some contactors and coils and some wire and things like that. I got down there and opened up the panel, and it was fucked. Just totally caught on fire. I got to feel what 480 volts feels like when you pass it through your body, and that was not fun. I thought I got hit by a truck. I'm not sure how long I was unconscious, but it was about midnight or so by the time I got down there, so there was no one around to help me. Fortunately, I woke up and went and got me a hotel, came back the next morning, removed the parts. There's a lot more to that. So that's a funny story, too, everything that happened that day, but I'll skip that for now. I threw some of the burned contactors, relays, and stuff, threw them in the trunk of my car and came back to the U.S., show the engineers there what happened, all that stuff. Anyway, when the police pulled me over and searched the trunk of my car, they found those parts, asked me what they were, and I told them what I do for a living and what they were, and they're like, what does a motor contactor do? I was like, turns on a motor. Can it turn on something else? These are for turning on motors. Yeah, I know it turns on motors, but can it turn on something else? I don't know. What's this thing? That's a relay. That's a timer. What's the timer for? I go, it's for a Y delta starter, so it's doing a soft start, so it has to turn on in the Y configuration before it switches to delta to slow start the 300 horsepower motor. And they're like, so what's the timer? Can it do other things? I said, no, it can't. They're like, this timer can't do anything? No, it turns on a motor, soft starts a motor, that's it. And they're like, and they kept on with this line of questioning for beyond my patience. And they're like, do you think somebody can make a bomb with this stuff? And I said, no, I don't think they can. You don't think anyone can make a bomb with it? I don't know. Not anyone. You have to ask them. But I don't know anything about that. And they kept going on. Finally said, you know what? If someone is smart enough, they can make a bomb out of anything. That was the wrong answer. So, yeah, that went down on my thing. But obviously that line of question was thrown out. But yeah, I forgot to mention that part. Is that I'd mentioned that I spoke to Ted Gunderson and met with him and bought his book, which was an investigation into the Oklahoma City bombing and all the problems with the official story. Well, that book was in the backseat of my car as well. So that's one of the issues that they tried to hold against me. And that didn't really go well for them either. But anyway, the way my trial went, like I said, it was about a year of prep, and then the trial lasted 3 days. It was a jury trial. I defended myself. And so this was 96 by that time. And the first day they called the witness, the cop. I had a motion to suppress the evidence of firearms that were seized because there was no charges connected with them. They had dropped all the terrorism and all that charges and stuff. So they just had a couple misdemeanors like driving with no insurance, driving with no license, and driving with no registration. And so anyway, they called the cop up to the stand. I'm like, excuse me, I have motions that we need to hear before the pretrial. I have pretrial motions that need to be heard. Oh, we'll get to those in a minute. And they call the first cop up to the stand, and he pulls out my AR-15 and shows it to the jury. Pulls it out of the case, opens the bipod, the whole thing. Puts it on show for them. Their faces are all freaked out. The prosecutor asks him questions, what happened, blah, 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 does her whole line of questioning. And then after she's done, then the judge goes, oh, wait, we have these motions we need to hear. Hold on a second. You have a motion to suppress evidence, exhibits, the blah, blah. Oh, I guess since they already showed them to the jury, it's a moot point now. So we'll just dismiss that one. So I object. Objection overruled without explanation. So then they go, okay, you can go ahead and cross-examine the witness now. This is totally unusual. This is not proper procedure. I was in there objecting the whole time. This is a violation of my rights. This is a violation of procedure. We had pretrial motions. You don't hear pretrial motions in the middle of witness testimony. This is what we're, blah, blah, blah. So I go and cross-examine this cop, and I ask him, how long you been an officer? This stuff. And then, do you consider yourself to be an expert in the California Vehicle Code? He says, yes. I go, can you explain why you pulled him over? I pulled him over for not having a license plate on the back of the car. How did you see the back of the car if you were in front of him? He hemmed and hawed and was like, oh, we saw it when he drove through the green light. We saw it, which was a lie. So then it's, okay, Are you an expert in the California Vehicle Code? Yes. Okay. Can you explain? I think it's 13459, 13460, something like that. The Vehicle Code sections. And he goes, I don't know those sections. I said, well, you testified that you're an expert. Yeah, I don't have it memorized or anything. So the judge reaches behind his bench and hands him a copy of the Vehicle Code. And it's this thick. And he hands him this book, and I go, wait a minute. And I show that to the jury. Okay, because he testified he spent 8 hours of his training at the academy to learn the Vehicle Code. It made him an expert. I go, so you spent 8 hours of your 16 weeks of training, you spent 8 hours learning this, and it makes you an expert. Yes. Okay. Sounds good. All right. So we open up the 13459, whatever, 17459. I don't know what it was, but anyway, open up and read it to the jury. So he's flipping through the book. He's going this way and that way and this way and that way. He can't find it in there. And I'm sitting there giving it this, like looking at my watch, tapping my foot. Finally, I asked the judge, I said, Your Honor, can I approach the witness? He said, please. I said, okay. I go up there and I flip the book open to the chapter. And he reads it. And I go, okay, can you read it out loud, please? And he reads it out loud. Okay, now will you explain to the jury what that means? And he's, I'm not really sure. It sounds like, I go, what do you mean you're not sure? You testified that you're an expert. So please explain in your expert opinion what that means. He says, well, it sounds like that you don't need to have a license plate on the back of your car, and you don't need to have a driver's license or registration unless you're engaged in commerce. I go, was the defendant engaged in commerce? No. Okay, where did you get the right to pull him over? Because he had no license plate on his car. And it says in section 4001 that you have to have a license plate on the back of your car and you have to have a registration. Section 4001 of the Vehicle Code that you already testified does not even apply in this instant? Yeah. So the Vehicle Code does not apply according to the sections you read, but then you applied the Vehicle Code inappropriately in this situation. I don't know. You testified you're an expert. What do you mean you don't know? I don't know. And then the judge stopped me from any more questioning, dismissed the witness. So I called the next cop up. And as he's walking up to the box, the judge says, hold up a second. Are you going to do to this guy what you did to that one? I said, yes. And he says, okay, we're not having that. And he says, the witness is dismissed. And I said, then I want a stipulation that he's going to testify that the exact same stuff as the last one. And I want the court to stipulate that this Vehicle Code does not apply to the defendant. It's like, that's overruled, or that motion's denied. And let's continue. Do you have any more witnesses? No. So that was day 2. Day 3, the jury deliberated, found me guilty of the 3 misdemeanors. And so I delayed the sentencing for about 2 months, as long as I could. Finally came in for sentencing, and the judge basically gave me 60 days. I demanded 3 days time served, and they gave me that. And so 57 days, and I'm like, okay, can I do weekends? No. Oh, okay. It's my first offense, whatever. First time ever being arrested, everything. I got a letter from my employer showing that I'm a good employee. I actually supervise a crew, all this stuff. I've been with this company for 6 years or something like that. And they're like, yeah, no. And I go, can I do a work release program then? No. You're going to do basically straight time. And so I'm sitting there going, wow, okay. So then I said, what about money? Can I just pay you fine instead? And he's, no, hold on a second. $81 a day times 60 days. I said 57. And he goes, 57 days. That's 4,900. He does like all the math in his head. Like he already figured, he already knew. I'm like, okay, can I get on a payment plan? Spread this out over payments. How long do I have to pay it? And he goes, no, you have to have that money here this afternoon by 4 p.m. or else you turn yourself in. I was like, well, shit. But I have till 4 p.m.? Yep. Okay, bye. And I left, and I was just going to bail. And then I was telling my friends what happened, because they, what happened in court today? I told them. And they're like, shit, so you can get out of this whole thing for $5,000? I'm like, yeah, what are you going to do? I'm going to fucking fuck them. I'm not going anywhere. And they're like, my friend Slava, a guy from Russia, Kiev. Yeah, he's, oh shit. He goes, what's the amount? I told him that. He wrote a check right there and like, give that to them. And I went in and paid it. And that was the end of that. So it was a rather hilarious story. But yeah, that it was a clown show, man. The trial was so fucking rigged, and what a clown show it was.